Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, March 20th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Mark Joseph Stern, senior writer at Slate, on whatever is happening with this Texas immigration law and also the Murphy case. Then Rebecca Burns, author and journalist based in Georgia, on the burgeoning anti-wind power movement. Also on the program today, Trump-pumped candidate Bernie Nardo 67 Marino handily wins in Ohio primary. Will go one-on-one with Sherrod Brown in the fall. Sorry. Also, more primary results and some exit polls from Ohio. New polling shows Trump up in Georgia and North Carolina. Anthony Blinken begins a new Mideast trip as Biden's big donors warn Biden over Israel-Gaza policy. Meanwhile, Bibi Netanyahu ignores the Rafah warning. Congress hoping to have budget text by today to beat Friday's deadline for the government to shut down. The Fed expected to leave rates untouched today. Meanwhile, new housing grew 10% in February, despite those high mortgage rates. Peter Navarro heads to a 4-month stint in prison for contempt of Congress. New FBI report, U.S. crime rate continues to drop precipitously. Another new report, half of New York City's families lack enough income to survive without assistance. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. It is
Hump Day.
That's right, Hump Day, the day that Emma Vigeland made famous.
Right, and copyrighted, just despite our values.
Yep. And pointed out that, like, now we're on, like, the...
it's sort of like the beginning of the week as you're going up a hill.
Correct.
And then
now we're
down.
coasting into
I don't know if people
the...
can wrap their minds around this metaphor.
Coasting into the weekend. Yeah. No, there's a lot of different ways of saying it, but yeah, that's it. So let's get right to it. We got a lot to talk about today. It's been busy as of late. Let's just go right to the clip that kept Emma from basically being able to sleep without having sort of violent nightmares. And
I can't really describe the level of anger that I was feeling when I first saw this. I'll be honest here.
This is an interview at Harvard, at the Harvard's Kennedy School. Jared Kushner, who, as you know, is Donald Trump's son-in-law, but also was a special advisor to the president, worked on for, I guess it was like 15 minutes at the beginning of the Trump's term, solving the Israel-Palestine crisis. That's where it started out. Then it just moved on to him making a deal with the Saudis to finance his buildings and debt, and then also to deliver to the Saudis a framework for a mutual recognition with Israel, which ultimately sidelined any of the Palestinian interests. And many scholars and experts believe that was at least a significant part of the motivation for Hamas's attack on October 7th.
Didn't even gesture at the Palestinians, just pretended they didn't exist.
Just pretended they didn't exist and hoping that they would eventually just go away. Here in this interview from February 15th, from a video that was posted to YouTube by the Middle East Initiative at Harvard, here he is expressing a similar sentiment about them just going away.
Syria, when there's refugees, Turkey took them, Europe took them, Jordan took them. For whatever reason, here in Gaza, there's refugees from the fighting, from an offensive attack that was staged from Gaza. Israel's going in to do, a long-term deterrence mission. And it's unfortunate that nobody's taking the refugees.
But also there are real fears on the part of Arabs, and I'm sure you talk to a lot of them, who think once Gazans leave Gaza, Netanyahu's never going to let them back in.
Maybe, but I'm not sure there's much left of Gaza at this point. So, if you think about even the construct, Gaza was not really a historical precedent, right? It was the result of a war, right? You had tribes that were in different places, but then Gaza became a thing. Egypt, used to run it. And then, over time, you had different governments that came in different ways.
All right, I'm
so
sorry, pause it for a
war.
sec, because we just have to unpack some of this. So when he said there's no historical precedent, that's fairly incoherent. But what he means there is that we could transfer them to another place. Like Gaza, it just kind of was created by the Israeli government as an open-air prison to house these people as their land was stolen. Like, they could go somewhere else. And he'll get into that in a second. But how cavalierly he says, I'm not sure there's much left of Gaza at this point. Yeah, that's the problem. That's the genocide that's unfolding.
Right. And just also to make something clear that, first off, the existence of Gaza and people living there
Ancient.
precedes the existence of the nation of Israel, we should just say.
You know who also precedes the nation of Israel? Joe Biden, older than the state of Israel, okay?
But Gaza is mentioned in, Samson takes place in Gaza, the story of Samson. What are we talking about? It's a recent invention or whatever he said.
But, again, what kind of precedent do you need to justify the fact that people live there and then have been now living there for 70 years because that was where they went when they became refugees because of their being pushed out of the other parts of Palestine, which ultimately became Israel. Psychopath. But go back a little bit so we can
bask in this.
Right, you had tribes that were in different places, but then Gaza became a thing. Egypt, used to run it. And then, over time, you had different governments that came in different ways. So you have another war. Usually when wars happen, borders are changed historically over time. And so my sense is I would say, how do we deal with the terror threat that is there so that it cannot be a threat to Israel or to Egypt, right? I think that both sides are spending a fortune on military. I think neither side really wants to have, a terrorist organization enclaved right between them. And Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable to, if people would focus on kind of building up, livelihoods. You think about all the money that's
pause it for one
this tunnel
second.
network.
You notice he at least had the tiny modicum of self-awareness when he said it could be valuable too, and then shifted when he realized ooh, wait a second, I don't want to give up my business plan.
This is the quiet part out loud. This is what is widely understood, but not supposed to be said out loud, Jared.
And he realized oh, wait a second, I just revealed my PowerPoint. Go back a little bit so that we can hear that again. This is, none of this should be in any way surprising, but what is think of the level of how much of a sociopath you would have to be. I can understand people conceiving of this. I can understand people robbing a bank, but announcing that you're robbing a bank, live streaming that you're robbing a bank.
We're gonna do
And
some of
this
this
is
money.
This, of course, is even more horrific because of the actual sort of like death and suffering that's being created. But this guy is so oblivious, so sociopathic that he's actually saying this stuff out loud at this time. Like
the flesh of the children that he wants to build his luxury developments on hasn't even fully decomposed off of the bones. So he's not just doesn't want to just build this his real estate development on their skeletons, but on their literal corpses at this point.
I think neither side really wants to have, a terrorist organization enclaved right between them. And Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable to, if people would focus on kind of building up, livelihoods. You think about all the money that's gone into this tunnel network and into all the munitions. If that would have gone into education or innovation, what could have been done? And so I think that it's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there. But I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up. But I don't think that Israel has stated that they don't want the people to move back there afterwards.
You saw Tom Friedman's column on Tuesday about where he put forward a plan to get out of this. Biden should recognize the Palestinian Authority unilaterally as a state, and MBS should go to Jerusalem like Egyptian President Anwar Sadat did in 1977, and he should say, I'll normalize with Israel, I'll recognize West Jerusalem as your capital, and I'll even pay to rebuild Gaza if you recognize a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. What do you think? Good idea?
No, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that there's certain elements of it that are correct. I think proactively recognizing a Palestinian state would essentially be rewarding an act of terror that was perpetrated into Israel. So it's a super bad idea in that regard.
Yeah, that is, so when he says when wars happen, borders change, right? Just borders change, aka just saying Israel's going to take more territory. Don't worry about it. I also found the fact that he said, they'll just clean it up. Like a cleanse, like an ethnic cleanse, something to that effect, before moving them into the desert. When he's speaking about that there, it just really is this slumlord psychopath who was responsible for his units basically being so dilapidated that it caused immense problems, and he had to pay a judgment in Baltimore. He's a real estate heir. His father went to jail for some of his own malpractices, but he grew up incredibly wealthy within the real estate business, so much so that Benjamin Netanyahu stayed in his childhood home when he was growing up. So he understands and has been a part of the Zionist project for quite a while, and connects it he intersperses it with his real estate ambitions there. The waterfront property, it's now been talked about before. Gaza's beaches, wow, look how beautiful they are. They're actually really a part of historic Israel. And this is what we should take here. Make a beachfront community upon these corpses. Of course it could be valuable. That's a big part of the motivation here. It's just not usually said out loud. So the fact that this complete Nepo baby created this chaos in part due to his insistence on the Abraham Accords, and then has the gall to sit at his alma mater, Harvard University, which just fired its first black president due to smears from the right related to this, and has been not standing up for the pro-Palestine students on their campus that are being doxxed. And he can say that so casually with no backlash in that audience there, is just like deeply disturbing. And you can just see if Trump wins in 2024, he's going to wait, a month before they begin to draw up plans for a Trump casino and golf course on the shores of Gaza. It's sociopathic. And yeah, I mean, I saw this.
At least it's honest.
Ahead. Yeah, at least it's honest. I just wanted to also really quickly read this article, or this paragraph that I saw the other day. It was in the White Review in a magazine from actually before October 7th in 2023 in May. I'll find the author in a second, but just to give people a sense, this is from of what the construction of these kinds of cities and the development on Palestinian land really looks like. Tel Aviv, this is about Tel Aviv. But Tel Aviv serves as a coordinating point in a globally integrated imperial project with dizzying financial and demographic porousness. The money generated from the purchase of settlement feta cheese in Marina del Rey Costco helps to finance the dispossession machines of the Jordan Valley, where the Israeli dairy conglomerate Tenuva operates a food processing plant. Former Israeli soldiers recruited into New York private equity firms make tax-deductible contributions to the 501c3 designated charitable nonprofit Friends of the Israeli Defense Forces to support the army that protects their second homes. Laundered billions stream in from Zionist mining extraction in Guinea and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where the mineral magnates flee to Israel to avoid international sanctions. This is the story of all colonialisms. Settlers build their tall, shiny things on the embers of the societies they torch, enlist the dispossessed into the production and maintenance, export the spoils, and bury their guilt in their families, splaying out on terraces, declaring themselves home at last. That is the exact operating mentality that Jared Kushner embodies there. And it's been the mentality and the driving force behind the continued expansion of Israel since its creation.
We'll talk more about this obviously later in the program, but the idea too, this notion that if the money had not been spent on tunnels and could have been spent on innovation, when you've had Israel repeatedly, you go back to 2008, there were airstrikes on Gaza's sewage and power plants. You can't innovate if you can't even maintain your own water supply, your own sewage supply, your own power supply, because since essentially 2008, Israel will bomb any attempt to build that.
They bombed all the universities.
I don't know. Yeah, what innovation is going to happen when you've destroyed all the universities? I mean, it's absurd.
Hundreds of attacks on healthcare facilities, by the way, since October 7th as well. That's been revealed. And to give it credit,
well, I'm talking like but I'm also talking
yes.
Before October 7th became the latest excuse for Israel to do these things.
Yes. So
prior to that, it was some other excuse, and prior to that, it was some other excuse, and prior to that, it was some other excuse.
Yep. Just to give credit really quickly, the piece is called Hating It Lush on Tel Aviv by Kaleem Hawa. I'd encourage people to read it.
In a moment, we're going to be talking to Mark Joseph Stern, senior writer at Slate, about the various Supreme Court cases that they've heard argued and the way that they just dealt with that immigration thing. And then Rebecca Burns, author and journalist based in Georgia, will be talking about the sort of burgeoning climate denialism that comes in the form of anti-wind power movement, I guess. I don't know how to really talk about that. But first, a word from our sponsor. When I have Saul, I don't have both my kids on a regular basis anymore because one of them has gone to college. I want to make him good food. I also don't have time to make him good food. And so often we order out. It's incredibly expensive and not always healthy. And then I found Factor. What is Factor? It is ready-to-eat meals. They are not frozen. They are fresh. They are chef-crafted. They are dietitian-approved. And they're ready to go in just 2 minutes. That's if you use a microwave, which I've only recently begun to actually do. Sometimes I'll heat it up in the oven too, but in the microwave in 2 minutes. There are 35 different options to choose from every week. They have like different, categories. You can do one that is like calorie smart. One is the protein plus. They have keto. There are also 60 add-ons to help you stay fueled up and feeling good all day, like snacks or like breakfasts and stuff like that. Get started today and get after your goals. Some of these meals are really, really incredible. I had this shredded chicken with mashed potatoes, and they have broccoli too, so that I can get Saul to eat something that's green. And I think they had cheese and bacon in it. It was like a mash. I don't know. It was fantastic. I've had sweet polenta. with chicken on top, and I had a salmon. Saul doesn't eat fish, but I did, and it was almond crusted, and it was like sort of like Moroccan spices. It was delicious, really delicious. Saul loves the chicken dishes, so it all works out. It's fantastic. I want to thank Factor for supporting the program, and you can head to factormeals.com/majority50. Use the code majority50. That's the number 50, majority50, and get 50% off. You got to try this. See if you like it. You will. But go check it out. Factor also offers 2-minute meals. You fuel up faster with Factor's restaurant quality meals that are ready to heat and eat whenever you are. They send it to you. It's super easy. I think we got 3 meals for 2 of us each, so maybe 6 meals at a time. And it was great. They have pancakes. They have smoothies. Oh, they also had these like little shot, juice shot things too that were also good.
Nice.
Yeah, we had the smoothies. We had the chocolate and the banana. Oh, yeah, no, they're very good. Head to factormeals.com/majority50 and use the code majority50 to get 50% off. That's code majority50, majority50 at factormeals.com/majority50 to get 50% off. Also, today's program sponsored by really one of my favorite products that we have. When I grew my beard, I stopped shaving as much as I was. And I was like, I don't want to deal with the subscription service that we were promoting. And so I was looking around for a razor. You know, I still got to shave here and on the neck a little bit and in between here and here. This is a Henson shaver. It is made by Henson Shaving Company, which was a precision aerospace manufacturer. They still are, I think, that make parts for the International Space Station and the Mars rover. And what they did is they took their CNC machines, aerospace grade, computer numerical something machines. Thank you, numerical control. I always forget what they're called. And they basically made a better razor by controlling the distance of the blade from the razor. Razor blades turn out to be like diving boards. If they're too far from the blade itself, they're not supported enough. They wiggle and this and that, and they'll scratch. They'll cut poorly. They'll nick you. This has a razor that extends 0.0013 inches, less than the thickness of a human hair. Secure and stable blade with a vibration-free shave. Has little channels here to evacuate their hair. But here's the thing about Henson Shaving, and I'm convinced it's because they're Canadian. They set out to make the best razor, not the best razor company. So in other words, you buy this. It really feels great in the hand. It's a beautiful piece of manufacturing or product or whatever you want to call it. But once you buy this, there is no subscription services. There is no proprietary blades. It uses classic straight edge blades. You are shaving for the rest of your life for $3 to $5 a year. That's it. $3 to $5 a year for the rest of your life. And this is a razor that will last that long. It is time to say no to subscriptions and yes to a razor that's going to last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/majority. Pick the razor for you. Use the code majority, and you'll get 2 years worth of blades free with your razor. You just got to add them to the shopping cart. So you take a package. You don't have to pay for blades for 2 or 3 years, essentially. And you're done. One time. Really is. This is a great gift. 100 free blades when you head to Henson Shaving, HENSON, shaving, SHAVING.com/majority. Use the code majority. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. We're going to put all of those links in the YouTube and podcast descriptions. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. Want to welcome back to the program Mark Joseph Stern, senior writer at Slate. Mark, I wanted to talk about the Murthy case, which has to do with the idea that the U.S. government, or at least this is the contention by these Republican state AGs, that the U.S. government cannot in any way respond to disinformation that is being spewed out, particularly in the time of a pandemic. But before we get to that, the past 24 hours, look, I went to law school for a year. Civil procedure, I was like, that was too boring for me. What has happened over the past 24 hours with this SB4? This is the Texas law that says they can run their own immigration services, essentially, even though last I checked, they're not a country anymore. They're just a state. What has happened over those 24 hours?
Well, it would actually take us a couple hours to go through the whole list, but basically what happened was the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has tried to let this law take effect, or had tried to let this law take effect. I just want to remind people, the Fifth Circuit is
where
law goes to die.
Yes, extremists.
It's Texas, Louisiana, I think one or two, is it Oklahoma as well? Mississippi. And this is a federal court that is packed with right-wingers, because more often than not, a senator from that state will nominate somebody, and if it's the, if it's a Republican president, then they'll be like, okay, let's put a lunatic on that circuit court.
Yes, and there are many lunatics on that circuit court, and two of them tried to put this horrible law into effect, and you went over it. I think it's worth just dwelling on, like, this really does nullify federal immigration enforcement. This transfers power over immigration policy to the state of Texas. It allows them to intercept, incarcerate, attempt to deport undocumented immigrants in the state. Mexico has said, we actually will not allow you to deport people back into our country. It's our territory, not yours. But they can try. It allows Texas law enforcement to racially profile basically anyone who looks undocumented and demand proof of citizenship, incarcerate them. It's a wish list of right-wing fever dream stuff at the border, right? So the Fifth Circuit, surprise, surprise, allows the law to take effect a couple of weeks ago, but it does so in a way, and this is where we get into the weeds, it issues what's called an administrative stay. Okay, an administrative stay is supposed to be like maybe 24 hours, 48 hours. A court is considering a case. It hasn't decided what it's going to do. It's just like a very brief stopgap thing. The Fifth Circuit has started issuing them for weeks and months at a time because it is unclear whether the Supreme Court can review and reverse administrative stays. So what the Fifth Circuit has begun to try to do is issue these stays that are only supposed to last for like a day, have them last for like 3 months, and then claim that there's nothing that the Supreme Court can do about it because it's just docket management, and that it's just this little procedural quirk that the Supreme Court has no say over. So that leads us to yesterday, right? So the United States government, the Department of Justice, the Biden administration, they run to the United States Supreme Court and they say, this can't possibly be right. You need to lift this administrative stay. You need to allow this, keep this law blocked. Allow us to prevail on our arguments at this stage. The Supreme Court refused to do so. And the reason why is because, as Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh put it in a separate opinion, they blessed the Fifth Circuit's gamesmanship. They said, oh, well, this is just an administrative stay. It's not a real order. And so we can't do anything about it because we're powerless to step in and overrule an administrative stay. At the same time, Barrett and Kavanaugh sent this message to the Fifth Circuit saying, hey, we're going to play your game for now, but we want you to know that we see what you're doing and we don't love it. And we are not going to tolerate it in every future case. So you better get your act together and stop trying to turn yourself into a miniature Supreme Court and start doing things by the book. The Fifth Circuit got the message and within a couple of hours had reversed itself and put the law on hold, which leads us to this moment when SB4 is fully on hold because of this insane sequence of events that I think just shows that there are now competing factions within the judiciary, like the super Trumpy people and the merely conservative people, and they are now fully engaged in a hot war over control of the rule of law.
And that's playing out like in between the Fifth Circuit and the Supreme Court, or at least elements of the Fifth Circuit. And do I have this right? Because yesterday when I started the show, Alito had done what? Like as an individual? Like that's the thing I got really confused about, because by the time I finished the show, it had been reversed again. And I couldn't for the life of me follow what was going on.
So Alito is the circuit justice assigned to the Fifth Circuit, which means that when there's a case that comes up from the Fifth, the fighting Fifth, as I call it, the circuit justice, who is Alito here, gets to issue a temporary pause while the full court contemplates what to do. So here, the fighting Fifth actually only gave the Supreme Court like a week to decide whether or not to freeze the law. This was more gamesmanship, trying to kind of just ram the court into action. And so Alito paused it, but he decided, instead of just doing an indefinite pause, which is what the other justices do, he decided to do a rolling pause that he would renew every week. So he would be like, all right, it's on hold until next Tuesday, and then I'll reconsider it. And earlier this week on Monday, when the previous hold expired, he forgot to renew it for 4 minutes. So SB4 was technically in effect for the 4 minutes that Sam Alito forgot to renew his pause of the lower court. And then he remembered, renewed it. It stayed on hold until yesterday when the Supreme Court said, okay, the Fifth Circuit has defeated us. There's nothing we can do. SB4 is now in effect.
What a crap show.
It's a crap show. It doesn't make any sense. It's a terrible way to run a railroad.
Guys are sort of like they're applying for the next open Supreme Court that they position they can get, I guess. And
they're all auditioning. All of them want to be on the Supreme Court. They want to be on Donald Trump's shortlist for the next round. They think the way to get to the top is to be as extreme and lawless as possible. This is what we call MAGA jurisprudence, right? It has nothing to do with the law. It's really messy. It's openly partisan warfare. But they think, I think accurately, that that's what they need to do to catch Donald Trump's attention to replace Thomas and Alito if he wins this year.
Okay, so now what is the Fifth Circuit, the full court, I guess, has issued an actual stay. Does the Supreme Court now have the opportunity to weigh in on this, or what happens next?
So the Fifth Circuit has not issued a true stay. The Fifth Circuit has issued another temporary stay while it considers issuing a true stay. It held oral arguments this morning. It sounds like the panel, it's a 3-judge panel, different from the last one. We don't even need to get into the procedure here. It's completely insane. They are going to side with the Biden administration. And so they are likely going to put SB4 on hold for a much longer time period. So no more of this 1 week, 1 hour, 1 minute stuff. I think very soon the Fifth Circuit is going to say SB4 is on ice. And at that point, Texas will go back to the Supreme Court and say, hey, remember how you ruled in our favor last time? Well, we just want you to do it again and let us begin to enforce this clearly unconstitutional law.
Yeah, that's the other thing about it, is the underlying sort of issue here seems to be completely absurd that it's even being entertained.
Well, there was a case in 2012 called Arizona versus United States, where Arizona tried to do exactly this, which was to usurp federal immigration enforcement authority and transfer it to Arizona police. And that was the era of Joe Arpaio. He wanted to be able to arrest anyone who couldn't show their papers. This was the notorious Papers, Please law. Very similar to what Texas is doing. Texas actually goes a little bit further in claiming it can deport people, but otherwise they're clones. And, you know, that was a precedent that remains on the books 12 years later. Like Arizona versus United States clearly is good law, clearly applies to this case. Texas was just openly defying it. And now what the Fifth Circuit did by letting this law take effect temporarily is overrule the Supreme Court from below, which is the Fifth Circuit specialty. They have said over and over again, we do not feel bound by Supreme Court precedent. We do not feel bound by stare decisis. We get to do whatever we want. If the Supreme Court doesn't like it, they can overrule us, but it's not our job to try to follow precedent.
That seems contrary to what I learned the subsidiary courts were supposed to do in our system, but I guess it's a new era. All right. Well, that said, let's talk about Murthy. What is the Murthy case about?
The Murthy case is another Fifth Circuit case. It haunts my dreams, Sam. I'm telling you, this damn court.
Well, my last thing I have on my list to talk to you about is the changes in venue shopping. But let's talk about this, because in the Texas instance, I mean, it makes sense that it's in the Fifth Circuit, maybe like we'll talk about that. But let's talk Murthy first.
Yeah. So here, two Republican AGs in Missouri and Louisiana filed a lawsuit in a single judge division in Louisiana District Court, knowing that they would draw a Trump judge named Terry Doughty, who is a notorious anti-vaxxer. He wrote this truly insane opinion a couple of years back saying that COVID vaccines don't work. He's notorious for issuing these sweeping nationwide injunctions. So these two Republicans go into his court and they say, we want you to issue a nationwide injunction that prohibits the entire federal government from communicating with any social media company in a manner designed to even mildly encourage them to remove or moderate any content involving COVID. Now, the backstory here is that people may remember in 2021, 2022, the Biden administration was working with Facebook, Twitter, a couple other platforms to try to tamp down the rampant anti-vax misinformation at the time, stuff about taking ivermectin to treat COVID, this idea that vaccines caused cancer and all of this dangerous stuff. The White House and some other agencies were working with like Facebook to say, hey, this information is wrong. You should downgrade it or you should remove it. And we encourage you to actually put out the facts that COVID vaccines work and ivermectin doesn't. It was not coercive. It was not like do this or else. These were task forces that were set up at the request of these platforms to work in partnership. That was the term the platforms used to try to ensure that they weren't making the pandemic worse. So these Republican politicians decide that that is a violation of the First Amendment. They go to Terry Doughty, the Trump judge. Terry Doughty issues what may be the most sweeping nationwide injunction in the history of the country on July 4th, 2023, a nice little patriotic flourish, 150-page opinion. And he says the entire federal government, the entire FBI, from like the director down to a desk secretary, the entire Department of Homeland Security, the White House, like all of the government, every employee is now personally gagged from ever talking to any social media company about any controversial issue, not just coercing them to do one thing or another, but just communicating with them, because they are engaged in a relentless and coordinated campaign to shut down the free speech of COVID vaccine skeptics. The Fifth Circuit naturally upholds much of that injunction. That is the setup for Murthy, which the Supreme Court heard on Monday. I think it's safe to say the Supreme Court is not pleased that it has to deal with this garbage pail of a case. The less insane conservative justices like Barrett and Kavanaugh seemed confused how things could go so badly awry in the lower courts. I think the top line thing here is just that it doesn't violate the First Amendment for the government to tell private companies what it thinks. That is a pretty bedrock rule, that the First Amendment only kicks in when the government's engaging in censorship. There was no government censorship here, so there's simply no First Amendment problem at all.
I mean, there's a couple of thoughts I have on this on both sides of it. One is like, what would be the line is one question. And two, in the event that they found Murthy in favor of this being censorious, or like an abridgment of the First Amendment, like how could the government sort of like meet with business leaders and say, hey, we think you should start paying your workers more? Like, I mean, I wish they would, well, let's put that aside and but we hear about this all the time. I mean, there was business leaders that went into the White House all through COVID where it was like, you need to start producing more of this stuff and you need to do that. Now, obviously, we're not passing a law that does, and we're not going to put you in jail. But this is what we're asking you. How could the government do that if they're not allowed to say to a social media platform, you should police the false information that's coming out?
So the plaintiffs in this case, the anti-vaxxers, the Republicans, would say, well, what's different here is that the government is trying to censor the speech of third parties. So it's not just that the government is pressuring a social media platform or any other private company. It's that this is a company devoted to hosting other people's speech. And so when the government steps in and says, hey, this says that you should put ivermectin in your eyeballs and it'll cure COVID, you should probably take it down, that is silencing the free speech of whatever poor unfortunate soul put ivermectin in their eyeballs and posted about it on Twitter. I think the response to that is, and this is actually something Justice Brett Kavanaugh brought up, which is kind of funny, but he was White House staff secretary. One of the jobs of White House staff secretary is to call up newspapers and yell at them for publishing stuff. Say, this imperils the troops, this is wrong, this is too mean to the president, whatever. He actually said on the bench, I give him credit for it, he was like, look, this is what government officials do all the time. They call up the media. They say, I don't like this op-ed. I don't like this piece. You shouldn't print that. You shouldn't print this. No one has ever thought until this case that that is a First Amendment violation. But the attorney, the Louisiana Solicitor General arguing for the kooks in this case, said, well, that has always been unconstitutional and we just didn't realize it, that it took this case for everyone to understand it. And he said that even mild encouragement, so not just like not coercive. We're not even talking about coercion. We're not even talking about like enthusiastic encouragement. We're saying calling up a company and saying you should maybe consider taking down this post or not publishing this op-ed, that alone violates the First Amendment and that courts have to step in and gag any government official who would dare to do such a thing.
We should also say that obviously corporations do this all the time. Yep. That is, there are people who are constantly hectoring any type of outlet, regardless of whether it's Twitter or what, as to their corporate agenda. Now, of course, they don't have the power of the government, so it's not like a First Amendment issue, but this dynamic exists. So where would the line be crossed?
So this is something that the Deputy Solicitor General talked about a lot, and I think defended a clear, bright line here. So I think if you call up, if you're whatever, White House staff secretary, Surgeon General, you call up Facebook, you say, you should consider taking down this post about COVID vaccines causing cancer because it's wrong. That is fine. That seems to clearly fall on the line of not a constitutional issue. But if you add to the end of that, and by the way, our antitrust division is seriously looking at breaking up Facebook for monopoly violations. And if you don't take down this post, then we might have to look into you a little more carefully to see whether we need to bust you up. That would cross the line into coercion. So there has to be a real threat of some kind of enforcement, some kind of punishment against the platform before it crosses the line. And that follows from this decision from the early 60s that the court kept talking about called Bantam Books, where basically the state of Rhode Island created this commission that was going around to bookstores telling them, nice little bookstore you got there. Wouldn't it be a shame if it got shut down because it printed stuff we don't like? That's coercion. I think we all agree, that is a violation of the First Amendment. But nothing of the sort happened in this case. It didn't even get close to that line. And so, again, it's sort of a mystery to me how this case reached the Supreme Court.
The only thing that is reminiscent of is when I think Donald Trump was saying that about Bezos in the Washington Post. And he was saying, nice company, Amazon, but we should maybe look into that for antitrust or something like that. I mean, he literally did that. I think it was, but apparently.
It doesn't count when Donald Trump does it.
That's my understanding. All right. Lastly, this change there's a federal judicial rulemaking body, which I was not aware of apparently, that has changed the process in which you could venue shop, like what it sounds like the Murthy people did in this instance. Explain that to us and just how big of a deal this is.
So in a couple red states, Louisiana, Texas primarily, they have these outpost courthouses in sort of random places like Amarillo, Texas, Monroe, Louisiana. they're called single judge divisions, which means there's just one judge who sits in that courthouse. Now, if you only watch TV about the law, that might not sound surprising, but actually federal district courts have many, many judges on them. And traditionally, when you file a case in a federal district court, it goes into the spinner that used to be an actual physical machine. Now it's an electronic thing, and is randomly assigned to one of those judges to prevent the plaintiff from picking their judge, because it is obviously deeply unseemly and looks very political for a plaintiff to be able to handpick which judge is going to hear their case. The single judge divisions have developed as a workaround to that, a kind of loophole, because these judges are the only guys in their courthouses, and these district courts, under conservative judicial control, have essentially suspended the rule of random assignment and allowed these judges to take and hear and decide any case that somebody files before them. So the Murthy case is one example. Probably the most notorious is the medication abortion case, the mifepristone case last year, right? That was filed in Amarillo, Texas, not because it had any true connection to Amarillo, but because the Trump judge who sat in that court, Matthew Kacsmaryk, was guaranteed to hear the case and guaranteed to rule against abortion because he's a lifelong abortion foe. The Judicial Conference, which is, as you said, kind of obscure, but an important body that sets the rules, has now come out with a rule saying that has to stop, saying random assignment is the rule. There should not be exceptions. And that is especially true when the policy or request or lawsuit or whatever involves some kind of nationwide relief, like a nationwide injunction, like an injunction against the entire federal government or something like that. That if it's a major case that involves major policy disputes, it has to be randomly assigned. Now, the kind of stinger here is that no one is entirely sure how the Judicial Conference can enforce this rule. This is not a body that has traditionally exercised a lot of direct, hard power. It's usually more of a soft power kind of thing. And so if these judges in Texas and Louisiana refuse to play ball, I do not know what will happen. The Chief Justice is the head of this conference and the head of the judiciary. Presumably, he can try to kind of like wield some hard power to rein in these rogue judges. But it is going to be a battle within the Article 3 judiciary. And at this stage, I cannot quite say who will win.
Interesting. And so what is the proposal as to how you avoid, like, just if you're a single court justice, you're just not eligible to hear this stuff? It's got to go to a bigger, like how in practice, never mind, will they enforce it? How do they articulate the rule?
So the rule is you might file in Amarillo, but the headquarters of that district court are in Dallas. And so your filing is going to go into the same spinner that every other case goes into and is going to get randomly assigned to some judge who sits somewhere within that geographical district.
Okay.
Might still be Amarillo, but will probably be Dallas. And that way, there's at least a fighting chance that a more impartial judge will hear the case. Matthew Kacsmaryk and Terry Dowdy and all of these goons aren't going to be able to just lay claim to these sort of partisan cases and use them to seize a whole lot of power from the Democratic branches.
Really interesting and very helpful. Mark Joseph Stern, senior writer at Slate, as always. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking to Rebecca Burns, author and journalist based in Georgia, who has written a piece about in the American Prospect about the sort of burgeoning anti-wind movement, which turns out to be the climate change denialist movement,
of course.
Surprisingly. We'll be right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us now, Rebecca Burns, author and journalist based in Georgia. Has written a piece in the American Prospect on I don't know, would you call this a burgeoning sort of movement? Or really, in many respects, it's sort of the mutation of climate denialists to a more sort of like practical, we have a problem with it, with this in practice, but in theory, we believe that we need some alternate energy sources, but in practice, this is really problematic, speaking specifically about wind turbines.
Yeah, I'd call this a new phase of the, multi-million-dollar climate denial machine that for years was sort of active in full view, funded by entities like the Koch brothers, to sort of deny and manufacture doubt about the science of climate change. And now that has become, largely undeniable for everyday people who are feeling its effect, has kind of changed tact and is waging a much more under the radar campaign to sort of discredit climate solutions. And what I was looking at particularly is the deployment of renewable energy in the United States.
And we should say, you cite Naomi Oreskes and Eric Conway's book, Oreskes. I don't pronounce poor names. A book of merchants, I should say, Merchants of Doubt. And we had them on, I guess, when that book came out. Maybe this was about maybe a year ago. I can't remember. But this really does follow the same game plan. They were talking about how within the tobacco business, there was a similar sort of trajectory to this. When did this sort of phase, now that we are sort of in that, it does feel like I guess Donald Trump calls it a hoax. And I should remind people that when he was president, the EPA was not allowed to use the words climate change. That was 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe climate change is been accepted by the Republican Party. I don't think so, but it's not inhibiting their multi-pronged attack. How long has it been that this sort of, I hesitate to call it a movement, but this sort of like tactic has been organized, and where was its first sort of like successful or unsuccessful deployment?
Yeah, well, I think we're certainly seeing what has been sort of a long-standing under the radar movement, in some sense, I would call it. We have very well-funded right-wing think tanks coordinating with sort of conservative activists on the ground in a lot of places. But this has really sort of come to fruition during the Biden administration, because there is a federal push to develop renewable energy, in particular offshore wind, policies like the Inflation Reduction Act. In other words, a federal climate policy that exists, even if it's, by no means adequate. So as we're seeing, some actual real movement on deploying large-scale renewable energy projects, in particular offshore wind, that's when this backlash that's kind of been brewing under the radar is really sort of boiling up sort of into full view and becoming a real problem.
What does that backlash look like? Like, what can they deploy from a propaganda perspective that discredits wind turbines as clean energy? Because what comes to mind, in my opinion, is like maybe appealing to some NIMBY concerns. Not in my backyard. I don't want this kind of monstrosity there. I think they're beautiful, but that's
they kill the birds.
I know, right?
They kill all the birds.
I forgot.
But I mean, we're joking. But
that's what Trump said. Yeah.
Let's start with the NIMBY thing, because I'm with Emma. I see these things and I think they're incredible.
But I will say, I've heard people say, "Oh, like I don't want this built here." I've heard that before, so I would not be shocked if that's what
the eyesore thing in North Dakota gets a lot of play.
Yeah,
right. So I would say, when we hear about sort of community opposition to wind turbines, to solar panels, to offshore wind turbines, it sort of all gets cast as NIMBYism. And I think that's certainly at play here. There are, in particular, for offshore wind, just wealthy homeowners who don't want to see turbines, even if they're going to be 12 miles offshore, have named their groups things like Save Our Beach View. So that's one layer of it. But I think the much more insidious thing at play is sort of the very deliberate deployment of misinformation. You just gave us the impression of Donald Trump talking about wind turbines. But we also have a lot of sort of lower profile operatives and activists who have spread information that offshore wind is responsible for the elevated deaths of whales. Offshore wind that doesn't exist yet, not climate change. That wind turbines have all of these health effects that are either unproven or are known to be false. They'll ruin your town, they'll tank your property values, they'll kill all the birds. And in particularly the mobilizing of environmental concerns, I can give you an example. So we have the Heartland Institute, sort of an infamous right-wing think tank, known for organizing sort of alternative climate change conferences, also known for, opposing federal environmental legislation like the Endangered Species Act, is now just this week filed a lawsuit challenging offshore wind, sort of using the Endangered Species Act, taking up the mantle and trying to say, we're doing this out of conservation concerns. It's woke activists, it's liberals that aren't protecting the whales here.
And it turns out, let's address that specifically, the whales thing. There is zero evidence that wind power deployment is impacting the whales, because these problems with the whales started before any of these deployment of these wind farms, these offshore wind farms, and is far more likely a function of climate change and the change in temperature in the oceans.
Correct. So all of the research scientists I spoke to for this story, because, this claim that offshore wind is killing whales is sort of the most prominent talking point that especially folks on the East Coast, but others are likely to have encountered. So it is true that we've had a couple years of higher than usual numbers of whales washing up on shore. Research scientists, biologists, federal agencies are trying to understand exactly what's going on here. It's likely some combination of threats from the commercial fishing industry, which is also kind of joined in these attacks on renewable energy, and the fact that marine species are having their normal routines, feeding and mating upended by warming ocean water. So the sort of cynical campaign to recast this natural event and just link it to something that in all likelihood is totally unrelated, is something that's actually having a troubling amount of success in a lot of places. So there was polling out of New Jersey that nearly 50% of residents, New Jersey and other states have seen large, wide margins of bipartisan support for renewable energy for many years. But this kind of disinformation campaign is actually measurably eating into that support now. So it's a troubling development.
So in other words, there are actually folks out there who are like, I don't want to kill the whales, even though like my view is not encumbered by these offshore things. I don't want to kill the whales, and so they're not supportive of it. This stuff it's really working.
Yeah, and in some cases, local communities, certainly it's important just for the broader project of, an energy transition in the United States that this have the support of local communities, but also in some cases, zoning permission or approval is needed from local governments in order to move ahead with projects. So there's both sort of a very specific, immediate way that in some cases, local governments, state governments can wield their powers when they're hearing from residents to block these projects. And then also just more broadly, the sense that the climate movement needs these folks on board to move forward and get where we need to be in terms of renewable energy deployment.
When RFK Jr. came out in talking to, I think it was Jordan Peterson, talked about our response to climate change as being authoritarian and whatnot. I went back, and this was, I guess, a couple of months ago, and remembered that when the big wind farm, offshore wind farm, was being proposed somewhere between off the coast, like near Nantucket, off the coast of Massachusetts, off Cape Cod, the Kennedys and RFK Jr. in particular were adamant that this was problematic. They have a compound on the Cape, and I think they do some boating out around there and this and that. That's a prime example, it seems to me, of sort of like hitting sort of both ends of that spectrum. Like you have a NIMBY, but also with some environmental cred.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think you're talking about Cape Wind, which was sort of a precursor to what we're seeing now and really sort of provided a model to a lot of the right-wing activists involved in this fight as to how to derail this kind of project. And I want to say certainly there were folks, raising concerns about the siting of that particular project and others, that can be very valid, that there weren't appropriate consultations with tribes, that the exact siting didn't take into effect some valid concerns, but that's not what's being raised, by sort of infamous climate change deniers that sort of flock to fights like these to push a very different message.
What's next in their agenda, or do they need a next, and they're just able to sort of successfully pursue these narratives about the whales or about the birds or about, I guess, are there other sort of things that we should be worrying about? Are we getting like some type of electromagnetic field from the wind that's being generated? And, we're getting brain cancer from the whooshing sound, or what is next on their agenda, or do they need a next?
Yeah, well, I think the troubling thing here is that delay, climate delay is sort of winning for the right. Delaying the action we need, any longer is having catastrophic effects. And also delaying renewable projects, runs up their costs, often screws up their financing, makes it less likely that they're ever going to be built. So the troubling thing is that sort of the playbook that we're seeing deployed, in the case we just mentioned, Cape Wind back in Nantucket more than a decade ago, one of the Koch brothers came out and said towards the end of that fight, my strategy has been delay, delay, delay. I'm going to fight it in court. I'm going to pour money into it. And that's been effective. And that's troubling as we do see, this push to accelerate new wind turbines, new solar panels that we need to probably, triple or quadruple in order to hit the Biden administration's goal for the power sector, which is to have it, running on renewables by 2035. Every sort of little delay adds up to a much bigger problem.
Indeed. Rebecca Burns, author, journalist based in Georgia, writing in the American Prospect against the wind. We will put a link to that at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Going to head into the fun half of the program. Just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a sustaining member of the show by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. And when you do at jointhemajorityreport.com, you not only allow the show to survive and thrive, you also get the free half free of commercials. You support the free half. You are essentially amplifying the voices of the people that we interview on a daily basis here, and allow them to get more exposure and allow their ideas to travel. And then you also get the fun half, and you can IM us because the app then, once you log into the app, it'll allow you to IM the show. And occasionally you get bonuses Right now, if you go to cedarseeds.com and use the coupon code majority, you get 15% off. But if you are a member and you wanted to grow some of that wacky tobacco in your backy yardy, as it were, yeah, I did it. You would have gotten an email last week if you were a member with a, 20% off in the members with the members code. So, this thing pays dividends. We may even do we've got a new merch thing that's going to happen in conjunction with our 20th anniversary, which is just a week and a half away. And maybe members will get a special code, a discount on that as well. We may do a member drive then. We'll see. But also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee and hot chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off.
Yes.
Snarkorsky, member benefits. How does one become, how you say, a member? Join themajorityreport.com.
I mean, and you would know because you're IMing into the show.
Yeah, they know. They're just being
Snarkorsky.
Emma.
ESPN. We spoke about March Madness, previewed that a little bit, and then just dove deep into the latest NFL moves, whether it be the Steelers quarterback shakeup, the Saquon and Kirk Cousins departures, and we talked a little bit about how Palestinian footballers are not being recognized by FIFA even when they are killed by Israel. YouTube.com/ESPN show.
Matt.
Yeah. Last night, Griscom back. We talked to Tom Nisha-John about Haiti and did a little PBD. Look back. I mean, David missed out on a lot of PBD, Patrick Bet David news over his honeymoon, so we had to update him on, for instance, him going in for a handshake with Trump at UFC and Trump not shaking his hand and instead shaking the hand of the woman next to him.
Whoa, what's happening with that?
Well, I mean, to be fair to PBD, he did get some FaceTime with Trump. UFC was I don't know, it passed us by, but everyone was there. Trump walked out with Tucker Carlson.
What was this?
The United, or what is it, UFC Ultimate Fighting Championships or whatever. Like, Trump was there and PBD was there and Tucker was there. Everyone was there.
Jeez. Did not get that invite.
I think your absence was noted. I think everyone's like, where's Sam at? We can't have UFC without Sam Seder.
Folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy.
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflakes says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs that look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males
psych. Fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. matter?
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. It is the fun half, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday was primary day in 5 states around the country. And story out of Florida, there was no Democratic primary there. And the story really out of Florida was that, and I should just say, historically, well, 2 things. One, the Florida Democratic Party is garbage. They're not good at what they do. They're not good at what they do. Certainly, Florida as a state has been trending red, but the Florida Democratic Party has definitely exacerbated that, I think, that trend. They, by not having and in the past, when there is an incumbent, they have, at least since 96 or 4, when Clinton ran again, maybe 96, they basically suspend the primary. But there are knock-on impacts to that. In Florida, the Democrats lost a couple of mayors. Biden won Delray Beach 62-38%. Delray's where all the Northeast grandmas go. I during spring break 40 years ago, I went down with my friend Mark. Well, I'm not going to say his last name, not like anybody would know. And we stayed at his grandma's place in some place in Delray. That was fun.
So you know firsthand.
I know firsthand. And 62-38%, it elected a Republican mayor today because there was no reason for Democrats to come out and vote.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, this is the genius party that has been putting up former Republican Charlie Crist and historic loser to multiple elections, one for Senate, which he lost, one for governor, which he lost.
That guy should be in the Guinness Book of World Records because he's probably run for more positions from more different parties. I think he went for Republican, Independent, and Democrat. Lost. That's impressive. In California, Kevin McCarthy's empty seat, the Republican running there did not reach the 50% threshold, so they will have an empty seat for at least another 2 months there, which is, fun. In Illinois, Trump was pushing for this guy, Representative Mike Bost, and Darren Bailey was the guy supported by Gates. Beatty? Oh, Beatty. And Beatty lost last night. And in Illinois, AIPAC poured about $500,000 into defeating Keena Collins. And so Representative Danny Davis who has been in Congress for 30 years and I think is like pushing 82, held on to a seat. But the big one, and we should also say in Ohio, Marcy Kaptur will be facing a state representative, Derek Merrin, and that could be a tough race in Ohio. But the big news really is that in Ohio, Republicans overwhelmingly nominated Nardo 67 too.
Nardo 67, 1967 too, because it's short for Bernardo.
Right. I'm sorry. That's his nickname that he used, or supposedly his intern used on the adult friend finder site.
For men, yes.
His real name is Bernie Marino. And it wouldn't be such an issue that he was on Adult Friend Finder looking for one-on-one male action if he wasn't so anti-LGBT.
And anti-women. I mean, he's the MAGA candidate here that has prevailed. We've covered this before. This is a really important race between him and Sherrod Brown. He will now be the Republican nominee against Sherrod Brown in the fall. And Trump has been endorsing him. MAGA world's gotten behind him.
He won big.
Yeah. There were polls going in saying it's a little neck and neck. We don't know. The polls that came in later indicated he would win, but he won by double digits is what the initial kind of results are indicating. And he's extreme. He's extreme.
A couple points. He was sued for race, gender, and age discrimination at one point. He was held liable for $400,000 in wage theft. He hired an intern, apparently, who, according to him, pranked him by putting him on an adult friend finder list, and also went to the trouble of flying down to Florida, where Marino's parents live, to make the prank look rock solid.
Committed to the bit.
And also supports a national abortion ban without exceptions, which is really relevant here. Because as you know, Ohio has written into their constitution, right? It was into the constitution that there is a right to an abortion, but that would be superseded by a national ban. And if you think Donald Trump is not going to pursue a national ban if he has a majority in the House and the Senate, you are wrong. Here is Ohio Republican Senate hopeful Nardo 67 talking about dancing around the idea of IVF. And, again, even the Alabamans who tried to outlaw this and say that they were actually babies in these frozen test tubes, he won't even come out and say that they aren't.
What about IVF, since the Alabama Supreme Court ruling basically said that frozen embryos are human beings? First of all, do you believe frozen embryos are human beings? And then where do you stand on IVF?
Yeah, I definitely support IVF. I've had lots of family members and friends that personally are touched by being able to have kids as a result of IVF. I support any policies that encourage people to have more kids. We're not even hitting birth replacement rates in this country, which is a problem. So anything that gives families in America an incentive to have more children, I'm all in favor of that. Like I said, I've been touched by that personally. I've seen how these babies change these people's lives who've been able to have access to IVF.
And just back to the quick question, do you believe that a frozen embryo should have the rights of a human being?
Well, again, the reality is, as I said, clearly I'm in favor of IVF. I think we want to have a birth rate in this country that keeps with replacement rates, and we got to do things that encourage people to have more babies.
In other words, I'm not going to answer whether I think it's a person or not, because I sort of do, but we're going to probably do a carve out for IVF because that seems to be where the political headwinds are. Vermont Ben has asked me, is a national abortion ban even possible with the Senate filibuster in place? You will recall that there has been a movement amongst Democrats to get rid of the filibuster, but that was inhibited by Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. If the Republicans have the majority, or they have 50 votes plus the vice presidency, there will not be, and if someone can point to me who that senator they think will not support the getting rid of the filibuster under Republican rule, I'd be curious. I mean, people could say, in the past, like, well, they're institutionalists like John McCain or someone like that. Those people don't exist anymore. I remember Chuck Grassley, who's been literally there probably longer than a lot of the furniture in the Senate. When it came to lying about a now arrested and fully discredited source for the lie that Joe Biden had taken $5 million, Chuck Grassley was out there banging the pots and pans about it. There is nobody in there who's going to push the brakes on that, I don't think.
And that institutionalist leader, Mitch McConnell, is out the door. I mean, it's going to be. There's only going to be, I think, more permissiveness towards the idea than anything.
And look,
else.
I am in favor of getting rid of the filibuster, even if it is under a Republican regime, because I think it's very important for our democracy, for people to understand who's responsible for this stuff, and so that people can account for it. So I wish the Democrats would do it now. I have a lot of confidence that the Republicans will do it if they have full control of
when they need to.
If they don't have the presidency and they control the Senate, I don't think they'll do it. But if they have all three, they'll do it.
Yeah. I mean, do we even really want to play that game? And also, do we want to play the game of Donald Trump doing things to limit abortion access via executive order, which we can't rule out as well, because since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, there's a whole host of things that Trump could do unilaterally by executive order, and if he were to be president, that would appease his far-right evangelical base, and we wouldn't necessarily need to get the legislation through. It would be disastrous. There's no question about it. I love how incompatible these thoughts are, though. He won't say if frozen embryos are human beings, but that he supports IVF. Well, we know that IVF involves multiple egg extractions if you're able to do so, and then the fertilization and freezing of eggs so that you can try, and it's less costly, less difficult for the woman. From a physical perspective, it's less cumbersome. You can have multiple bites at the apple, if you will. But sometimes the implantation takes place and there are frozen embryos that have to be destroyed. So if you can't say that it's not a person, then do you support the murder of them or do you not? They're incompatible thoughts. You can't support IVF and then also say these fertilized frozen embryos are people too. It's not a tenable position. So
it's tenable. It's just completely inconsistent with itself.
Okay, well,
like within the Republican Party, it is actually the position. They have it. They're willing to do it. They're way beyond the sort of like the consistent, cogent consistency. Vermont Ben says, what about Susan Collins or Murkowski? Susan Collins, I have no doubt, would go along with it. Murkowski, it's not inconceivable that she wouldn't flip. I don't know, but
Collins would probably bellyache and then support it.
Without a doubt.
And just a quick correction, it was Darren Bailey in Illinois. Sorry, Sam. Darren Beatty is a former Trump speechwriter who I thought it was. My bad.
All right. 646-257-3920 is the number. We will have the voicemail is off. We will take some of your phone calls. And now a couple of IMs. Brooklyn Best. What is the chance Trump goes to prison? Limited. Although I think there is an increasing chance that some of his property is going to be sold off.
Yeah.
I hope at fire sale prices. It would be. I would love to get in on some of this. I was going to say.
Well, that's the scuttlebutt, is that he potentially may have to give Trump Tower to that nasty woman, Tish James.
That would
Letitia.
She should give it away in like a lottery system. We should move our office into Trump Tower.
That's exactly. That's exactly what I want. In fact, here is Larry Kudlow, who was Trump's former head of the Council of Economics, National Council of Economics, and also worked under Ronald Reagan And then, he had a stint on CNBC and then ultimately moved to Fox after his stint in the White House.
Fox
and,
Business, which is
Fox
where
Business.
they hide even the crazier people, if you'll believe it or not.
And Larry seems to be done with his day drinking for the time being and is now in charge of trying to beat the bushes for anybody who is willing to loan Donald Trump somewhere around $500 million to cover his bond. And, or I should say to cover his fine. They just want, it's just a loan. Why won't anybody do it? And this is, if you've ever been in one of those situations like where, somebody says like, hey, can I borrow some amount of money from you that you either don't feel comfortable loaning to that person? Or
this is how Larry messed up. He did not show sufficient respect to the shark here. He didn't come into this and say, hello, sharks.
I need $464 million.
$464 million for and here is my proposal.
Here's Kudlow with Kevin O'Leary.
But Kevin O'Leary, I think this is where it's going to go. Now, I was wondering, if he can't get to the Supreme Court, will you loan him the $460 million? Just to help, in order to protect America's name. Think of it that way.
To get the bond, he was able to get the 90+ million from Chubb.
Yeah.
I don't know of a bond more than 90 million. I don't recall one.
Yeah.
And so you need cash to back up the bond insurance. And so now we're talking about the terminology of seizing assets. That actually...
Pause it for 1 second. You know what I love about this Kevin O'Leary situation, and incidentally, this guy's a douchebag. The best part about it is he's so thrown off and he so desperately wants to get away from the question because in the back of his mind, he's like, Trump could be president and I may need to go for favors on him and I need to sort of like pretend that question wasn't asked. So at first he tried to laugh it off, but Kudlow came at him harder. And now he's like trying to find, what can I find with somehow argue this is unjust?
Well, we covered this on a Thursday or when you weren't in a few weeks ago. He got into a big argument on CNN with their anchor, that lawyer woman, Laura Coates, and he was essentially saying that this judgment of the civil fraud judgment was a hamper on American ingenuity.
Everybody
and
does
how
that.
Everybody does it, right? You the banks and
there's no losers. Capitalists and banks all win.
Exactly. It was a victimless crime is what he's saying, ignoring the taxpayer part, but then also admitting that as a real estate developer, he and the banks are a part of a handshake deal where they all understand, this is funny money. We're overinflating things. We're all trying to get rich here. We're underinflating things when it's convenient for us. And so he's been doing this extremely public PR push on behalf of Donald Trump. And what Kudlow does here is says, Kevin, put your money where your mouth is. Are you going to give him the money? And he avoids the question.
Yeah, go back just a little bit.
It's so important. If this is so important for America, and
jumble fumble.
Get your wallet out.
And to be clear, Chubb gave him the 90 million, I should say, bond to cover his E. Jean Carroll verdict. But apparently they're not, they would have some problem with probably their board of directors going wait, are you serious? No effing way.
All these great investments.
450 million, $500 million pass.
To a guy who is notoriously doesn't pay anybody back.
Exactly.
In order to protect America's name. Think of it that way.
To get the bond, he was able to get the 90+ million from Chubb.
Yeah.
I don't know of a bond more than 90 million. I don't recall one.
Yeah.
And so you need cash to back up the bond insurance. And so now we're talking about the terminology of seizing assets. That actually... That's foreign language to an American investor.
Right.
They want due process. They want the appeal. That sounds like Venezuela. It sounds like Cuba. Mm-hmm. It's a really bad look.
Wait till he hears about what happens if they suspect you for having any drugs. You don't even
civil asset.
Never mind. Due process. They can just seize it.
Yeah, but there was due process.
Well, but he's saying due process.
That's what's amazing.
Deference to the capitalist process.
Well, he's saying like also the appeal. Well, all right, then get a loan.
This is not the seizure of, like, I don't know, a farm to return to the people or for it to be publicly owned as if it's like a socialist country. This is the fact that he cheated on his taxes and that they're taking that money back and cheated other institutions as well. And this was a result of the due process. This was a court judgment. They went through it.
Yeah, and the thing is if you look at numbers for civil asset forfeiture and the amount just like taken by law enforcement, yeah, it's actually like the only new thing is that this might be applied to super rich people now.
That's what he's panicking about.
To an American investor, they want due process. They want the appeal. That sounds like Venezuela. It sounds like Cuba. It's a really bad look for New York, but I think it's gone beyond New York now. Bipartisan participants and financial services managers are not okay with this, and getting very uncomfortable. And I think whether it's the Supreme Court that provides the adult supervision, whether it's somebody else, we desperately need for this kid's party for the adults to get home. Yeah, we need them to come home now.
Some appellate court.
Yeah, except for this is a state action, so.
Oh no, the financial managers are upset with it. It must mean democracy is under threat.
Well, it's good that it's bipartisan. At least then we know that like this isn't really a political prosecution.
Yeah.
I for one am very excited to see the fire sale on the Trump properties.
Me too.
I think this is good for New York. I think it's good for New Yorkers. I think it's good for the country.
Yeah, I think anybody like that, the idea that this sort of thing where bankers and property developers can sort of like have a fictional sort of financial relationship, and that's what he sort of is worried is going to be under threat if the Trump stuff starts getting applied widely. I think that would be, I think as somebody who rents in New York, I think that maybe that relationship hasn't played out to everyone's benefit.
Yeah, but you know what I'm looking forward to less? Kevin O'Leary as Treasury Secretary.
Is he even an American citizen?
Oh, is he not? Oh, he's Canadian? Hey.
That's it in the best.
Something just to note, like, he turned that down in public, right? But Elon Musk did just meet with Donald Trump, and it's the
Put
fact
money
that
where your mouth is, buddy.
The fact that we have it's not out of the question that the richest man on earth could bankroll a significant portion of the leading of the Republican candidate's legal defense, and that candidate could win.
It's called America.
And then
free speech, Emma. Apparently, you'd never heard of it.
Do you know what kind of payback Elon Musk would get from a Trump administration?
Oh, we had a couple of guys like that. Who was it that was facing a huge penalty by the? Was it that guy?
Talking about Prince?
No. Maybe the guy who was deep into natural gas. I can't remember exactly who it was. But there was a guy who got a huge value out of it.
But the point, but like to help Trump personally with his legal bills.
Yeah, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
I mean, it would be.
It's all the same for me.
Yeah.
Here is Judge, what's her name? Judge Judy? Judge Pirro. Judge Janine
Pirro.
Here she is talking about how Donald Trump's owing fines has created crime in New York or something to that effect. Again, it's the day drinking brigade that is really out in force here.
It's more than $454 million. It's 120% of that. That is almost $500 million in cash. Give me a break. And I'll tell you why they don't want to take a risk and give them that money. The reason they don't want to take a risk and do that is because this market, this real estate market in New York is very, very vulnerable. Nobody knows what the valuations are worth anymore. New York is now a crime-ridden city. There is crime all over, immigrants all over. They're about to go bankrupt because of the immigrants in the hotels and all the areas of New York City. And there's another reason. Not only is New York unstable because of the Democrats who've
Pause it for
literally
1 second.
destroyed.
I'm going to suggest that there is some instability here, but it's not with New York. One should look inwards, I think. This notion, anybody who lives in New York knows that what she's saying is absolute BS.
They're shooting this in New York, but they don't. They go from town apartment to
right.
town car to studio to town car to
Yeah,
home.
she lives out in like Westchester or something like this. You understand what she's saying. The reason why people aren't loaning Donald Trump $450 million or whatever it is, $500 million or $520 million after the interest, she argues, is because people are afraid to invest in New York. And as such, and it's because of all the immigrants and all the crime and all the Democrats, I guess we can put this to test and we'll see if people buy his properties when we put them up for sale.
And
if nobody buys the properties, maybe that's the issue.
And who is in debt? Who is she claiming is in debt here? Is it the city or is it the hotels? Because this came out last month that Eric Adams, the Politico's writing this, throughout most of his tenure, Adams has painted a dour picture of the city's finances and cast himself as the proverbial adult in the room, willing to make tough choices, an implicit rebuke of left-flank Democrats from the more conservative executive. Last month, however, he unveiled a $109.4 billion budget that revised revenue projections upward by a stunning $3 billion. So he had been saying that they needed to justify all of these cuts because the city was in such dire financial straits, when in fact the projections for the budget have exceeded what he had claimed, and that there's more than enough money to go around, including to shelter migrants. So it's just a lie. Crime's down.
New York is back, and we don't want to ruin it by allowing Donald Trump to keep his buildings. But go ahead.
New York is now a crime-ridden city. There is crime all over, immigrants all over. They're about to go bankrupt because of the immigrants in the hotels and all the areas of New York City. And there's another reason. Not only is New York unstable because of the Democrats who've literally destroyed this city, but because of the fact that people in business fear Letitia James. They fear an absolutist, authoritarian, totalitarian, I will get him. If I ran for office under that line, they would have had me out on ethics grounds before I even made it to the office on the first day. But let me say one thing.
Where do we sign off on all of this?
Yes.
This is win-win-win.
Yeah.
I love that. Like all of this bitching about the Trump judgment from Kevin O'Leary and from Judge Jeanine is all like all the worst people in New York are really scared right now. Won't you think of the financial managers and the people that Tish James is scaring? I am thinking of them, and I'm quite thrilled at the result.
Going to the phones, calling from an 860 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 860. 860.
Hi, is this me?
It is you.
Hi, Sam. Thank you so much. Great show today. Thank you so much. It's Finn in Denver. Haven't called in a long time. It's my birthday. Just wanted to, as a birthday gift, get your thoughts on what's your go-to diner in Worcester. I'm partial to the Boulevard. I'll take my answer off air. Thank you.
All right, there you go. It's Finn in Worcester. Finn from Boulevard. Yeah, the Boulevard Diner is probably your best bet. On Shrewsbury Street, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, you're still on the phone. I thought you were going to take your answer off.
I got nervous and then I got unnervous.
Okay. All right. So you feeling better? Yes. I mean, that was, but there's a lot of different restaurants in Worcester than when I was there. I mean, I would just go to Coney Island Hot Dog all the time. Or Friendlies.
Oh, Friendlies. Those are all shutting down. That got bought up by private equity.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. I loved Friendlies growing up, too.
Most of the time I would eat was at the Acapulco, which is long gone, too. That was across from the Sole Proprietor.
Oh, no kidding. I have a apartment over on Highland, so that makes
I met the B-52s. Were eating there one night.
Wow.
And we sat down and when I was in high school.
It's the most old man sentence you've ever said in your life.
It's not the most old man sentence, but it's one of the top ones. Yeah. Yep.
I am incredibly jealous. Can I ask what year that was? I'm just trying to place it in terms of the B-52's timeline.
It would have been probably 1983 or 84.
Super cool.
Yep. And that's it. I went to Doherty right up the street from where you live. So
lovely.
Bye-bye.
What? Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. There you go. Lives on Highland. I love it.
Just one note on the I can't find the exact stat, but the obsession with New York City by these people who claim to obsess with crime, like there actually is pretty high violent crime in America. And for instance, in Missouri, I think this is true. I'm looking the stat up, but even if you remove St. Louis, Missouri is worse than New York City, right? Like we have lots of violence in this country.
Prior to 9/11, the New York was demonized constantly by the Republicans, constantly. And then after 9/11, it took another 10, 15 years before things started coming back around. I mean, who was it, that pitcher from the Braves who came here? And
Rocker. John Rocker. Yeah.
John Rocker. Yeah. And what was that? That was 10 years ago he said this, right? There's too many immigrants or something? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he basically was everyone on the street has heroin needles in their arms and are dying of AIDS on the street, and people were like, "What are you talking?"
It's bro, you are the least classy baseball player of your generation.
There's a lot of guys. I mean, Schilling is also. There's a lot of weird right wing kind of shock jock baseball guys that have come out.
But John Rocker is the. I'm pretty sure the Eastbound and Down sort of inspiration.
Yep.
Oh, really?
It was December 1999.
Oh, it was December 99.
Yeah,
okay, well that's my point.
Okay,
Prior to 9/11,
yeah,
that's what you would hear from these people.
When was Rudy Giuliani elected for his first term?
It was in the early 90s.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, I was going to read some IMs. Let's take another phone call. Call from a 909 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Oh, hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Lynn calling from Upland, California.
Okay, Lynn from Upland, California. What's on your mind?
I just would like to, I'm a transgender woman myself, and I just wanted to talk about Next Benedict, and just it was really, a shock to me recently. I saw an ABC News video, and the comments down below were trying to characterize Next as a bully, and a lot of just besmirching, the death of a young trans person. It really hit me hard. Yeah. And that this is such a huge problem for the trans community right now, and that seems like it's going largely unseen. The bans on puberty blockers has a huge effect on the well-being of trans kids' lives. That I don't think people realize how close to the edge a lot of these trans youth are, and to me, it's a kind of genocide. That they're so worried about talking about sterility, of but I'm focused on saving lives, and
right,
and they're focused on sterility. There's dead children,
Well, I mean, from the
like,
perspective of
like-
these fundamentalists and those who've sort of adopted this religious fundamentalist worldview without even really realizing what they've adopted. The issue of fertility is not one of like we need to replenish people. It is simply a function of like we have a set job for the two genders that we acknowledge, and that's it. It is immutable because God says it's immutable, and that is what they're taking offense to. They don't care. They don't care about the actual person that they're talking about. They're talking about maintaining a structure of this social construct that we call gender, so that people conform to what ultimately is some version of the patriarchy. I mean, that's basically it. That's what's going on there. They just launder these ideas through different ways because they're on the God squad. And if you're not doing what their fundamentalist teachings are, they're going to find various ways of criticizing and attacking those ideas.
Yeah, and whenever something like this happens, a trans person commits, suicide, and it's often blamed on their transness, like, oh, if only they weren't trans or didn't know they were trans or something. It's really sick because it's the trans community that feels this the hardest. So the casts are paying back on us.
It's not a great environment for you out there, and I'm sorry you have to go through this, but hang in there.
Well, California's fine. I just worry about, my friends in the Midwest and all that, because I've heard from people, and you would not believe the horror stories I've heard from,
I don't doubt it.
Anyways.
All right, appreciate the call.
Thanks.
Ramona, in a sane world, next Benedict would be alive right now, indeed. Hopeful one. I just have to ask. Watched TYT last night, and they heavily focused on an admittedly awful squatter situation in New York, but it's really a one-off. What are your thoughts on the squatting laws in New York, especially with mega investors taking what should have been meant for more affordable homes in Hudson Yards, etc.? I only vaguely know about that squatting situation. I'm sure there are situations which are difficult and not great, but they're in the 80s and the 90s in New York. A third of, I don't know how much it was, but like everywhere down on Lower East, the East Village in Alphabet City was all squatter stuff. It was all just like
that's the premise of Rent, is it not?
What's
the musical Rent, right? Yeah, squatting.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was all
Alphabet City,
right? And it was all. I mean, the only thing that kept the city together was, I mean, from falling apart was literally like squatters investing in these abandoned buildings.
It's a second order issue in the sense of like, why are people squatting? There's not enough housing. Housing is extremely expensive. We have a bunch of units that have been rented out as or have been purchased as speculative properties for capitalists as opposed to actually it being housing. We don't have rent control in this city. The processing for affordable housing is backlogged. There's a lot of other problems, and I'm infinitely and less concerned about landlords than I am the people who need to squat or don't have the ability to pay rent. So that's where my focus would be, but I don't know the specifics of the story, so I can't comment on it.
We have I don't know that story, but the bottom line is we have a housing crisis in the city. And when people get desperate, it's something that the city needs to address.
And so you have people who need someplace to live that can appeal to the city, and you have landlords that could appeal to the city, saying, "Hey, let's get some cops in here, beat these people out of here." Which one people support, I think, reveals what their politics are.
But I'm sure the New York Post is having a field day with this. Calling from a 571 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is me. Hi, my name is Ramsey. I'm from Ashburn, Virginia.
Ramsey for Ashburn, Virginia. What's on your mind?
Hi, I'm just calling to ask about the Virginia has a lot of elections in general. Especially this year, we have 2 primaries and then the general election. But every year there's the elections. I just feel like hearing like all these politics and all these politicians it's just exhausting me. And I want to use my right to vote, but it's just getting harder and harder some days to like really push myself to get out there and vote and find the right politicians for what I'm trying to listen to, especially like my president is not listening to me or my people, especially on genocide. I feel like my my representative, my senators. Tim Kaine did a little bit of good stuff recently, but other than Tim Kaine, I just feel like everything's silent.
I mean, look, I think looking for the right politician, you're going to spend a lifetime doing that. I think you make an assessment. Who am I going to vote for that is going to have the highest, the best chance of bringing about what policies I'm interested in? And largely that is, depending on, maybe how localized it is, largely it's going to be like, who else is going to vote for them? I mean, largely.
No, of course.
It's not going to be a 1-to-1 ratio. It may not even be like a 1-to-3 ratio in terms of how responsive these people are, but it's really just a question of how likely. And if you look around and there are people who share similar desires for promotion of certain issues as you, and they're going to vote for that person, that is like an indicator, and that person has a good chance of winning, or at least a decent chance of winning. There's your decision. You don't have to worry about the individual as much. Now there are exceptions to that rule, of course, but broadly speaking, it's like you don't have to spend that much time in it.
Of course. I'm just worried about I'm not worried looking for the politician who matches my perfect identity, because the only person that can match my identity would be me. So if I wanted that, I would run for politics myself.
Right.
I mean, not politics, run for a position myself. I'm just worried, all I'm finding is obviously politicians lie, but I'm just finding out I feel like no one listens to their voters anymore, and all this money spending from all these outside groups just make our politicians destroy us humanitarily.
Well, I mean, look, I think the again, you choose the politician who you have the best shot of having your issue set, and then find an organization, the DSA or some other organization, and begin to organize to build your power.
I mean, there's Justice Democrats Virginia, there's Virginia DSA. That's where you can try to influence like what happens before the actual musical chairs moment, electoral moment where you have to actually vote for one of these liars. But yeah, I think don't expect too much, because the thing is like a politician can actually act as if they do hear you and speak for you for the purposes of the campaign, and then all of a sudden they get into office and they become one of the leading mascots for a genocide. Exactly. So like this is the pitfalls of electoral engagement. But the question is like get organized with DSA or Justice Democrats or some other pressure group.
Appreciate the call.
Of course.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Calling from a 308 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it is Kowalski from Nebraska.
Hey.
Kowalski from Nebraska. What are you trying to do by sending cupcakes to this office?
There should have been a note.
There was a note. March 2019. I found this smug guy wrecking libertarians, so enjoy. Kowalski.
Yeah.
And then you punish me by sending cupcakes here? I ate three in about 5 minutes.
That is a self-control problem.
It is a self-control problem. One that I think
he's advertised it.
If you're listening since 2019, then you got to be aware of it.
This smells like sabotage to me.
Kowalski, do you have a file on Sam? You can send us some lavender stuff next.
Exactly.
Well, were they at least good?
Oh, they were delicious. There was two
Very
different
good.
types, and they were delicious.
They had to be disposed of though very quickly.
Yes, I was like, I ate like 2 or 3 of them, and I said to Bradley, "Get these things out of this office immediately."
Well, you can take them home to your significant others.
I got news for you, Chief. They're not making it home if I'm carrying them home.
Wow. Sam, I think you should have lived through a little bit of poverty at some point in your life to learn self-control. Look, when times get hard out on the prairie, we have to forego life's luxuries for, at least a few months.
I am much better when it's not around me. If it's not around me, I don't know. I won't eat for. I could go days without eating.
It's a
anything.
self-control problem.
It's a self-control problem. I see it, then all of a sudden I've got to. I can't deal with it.
So a skill issue. All right. Well, glad you enjoyed them at least.
I did. They were great. It was very sweet of you. Literally and figuratively. But thank you very much. And right around the time of the anniversary of the show.
Was that intentional?
Not from me. I guess the algorithm saw fit to, show me this smug guy just, beating up libertarians, which I found quite amusing 5 years ago. Hard to think that's how long
Which
ago
libertarian
I
was it, Kowalski?
watching your show. I think it's the one that's used in your guys' fun half transition. The one that gets clipped a lot. I forget his name.
Daryl Perry.
Forget. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that was something else. Daryl Perry. I hope he's okay.
Zero chance he's okay.
Yes, that's true. How's the sowing going there?
No sowing yet. I am spreading dry fertilizer. Spring came early, as I think it did for a lot of areas. I'm not sure if that means early planting, but everybody's getting field work done earlier. But planting might be off just because there are these shots of cold weather that'll keep hitting through. And that is actually an argument that some folks who in the Republican Party who are trying to contend with the effects of climate change debate that this is wonderful. The Midwest will be like the Cerrado in Brazil. We'll be able to double crop. No, we won't. Yes, things will be hotter. Yes, the winters will be more mild. Unfortunately, that doesn't change early or late frost. So as far as your growing stages, you're still screwed. So
does it not change early and late frost? That is my big fear about all the fruit trees up here is that they're going to blossom or they're going to start to blossom, and then we're going to get 27 degrees, and we're going to lose everything like we did last year.
Yeah, that's the problem with perennials. The stuff I grow is all annual crops. So your perennials, which can blossom given, heat or whatever, that would be an issue. So trees and fruit producers are going to be more susceptible, but your hardy grains and stuff, we'll probably just stick with the old diet and tables. I guess we might be able to get more rye out of all of this, but that's not exactly good for anything other than raising livestock.
Well, appreciate the update, and again, appreciate the cupcakes.
Oh, no problem. But before I go, I did want to bring one thing to everyone's attention. North Dakota's governor, Doug Burgum, did a good recently in a video that has been going around. I'm sure some of you have seen it already. He talks about the issues with zoning in cities, which actually was pretty good and concise on it, pointing out how we have turned most of our cities into spaces you can't really walk in, and how that is an economic drain because you have to build more useless infrastructure to connect suburbs to the city. So he actually did it good.
Doug Burgum? I mean, look, I appreciate good coming from Doug. North Dakota, it has 2 cities with downtowns. I mean, okay, maybe you add Grand Forks in there. It's a strange place to come from to make that point, but I appreciate it nonetheless.
Well, it actually does make a lot of sense, I think, from his perspective, because if you could imagine a lot of the small towns that are all spread out that get to drive in.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a town of 2,000 people and you have the sewage and water and electrical infrastructure for a place of 15,000, that's just a waste of resources.
Right. Yeah, just sprawl. I mean, that's how North Dakota developed post-automobile, basically, and into these just suburban sprawl for every town, and very, very few that have even the old style, Main Street. But yeah,
that's why we love county fairs. You can actually walk and go around everything. It's wonderful. That was my takeaway from New York, but I'll leave you at that. You guys have a good one.
I appreciate the call. Fart Wayne. Sorry.
Fart Twain.
Fart Twain. Let's go, Bergam. Been a Bergen boy ever since I learned about him months ago. Dragon Rider. Ask Kowalski why his Prairie Fire YouTube channel has not been posting much. Well, it's probably a season where he's got to be planting.
Hard at work.
John Miller, if you feel disillusioned with politics, volunteering in your community and supporting unions are something that will help you deal with feelings of ineffectiveness or helplessness.
Yep, get out of the ideas realm and into the society and political action.
Left is bestest. Every Kowalski call should end with a thank you to America for producing and letting us hear from a real man. I don't know what's going on out there, but the Republicans seem to have a problem with this. Haven't we seen that Republicans love? We just saw that Katie Britt retell this rape scene. We've seen other Republicans when they, there was a big joke about Ed Meese back when they were trying to outlaw pornography back in how much time he had to spend combing through all this porno to determine if it was appropriate or not. Here is Nebraska Republican Senator Steve Halloran in the Nebraska State House during a debate on a bill regarding inappropriate content in books being in schools. He read a passage from author Alice Sebold's book entitled Lucky, which describes Sebold being sexually assaulted. While reading the passage where Sebold recounts her rape, Halloran inserts another state senator's name into his reading, talking about Michaela Kavanaugh for some reason. This is just, first of all, this book, I have no doubt, is for upperclassmen in high school. And if he thinks that rape doesn't exist with 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 15-year-olds, the guy's out of his mind. This is
10-year-olds?
important. Yes.
I mean,
The story's about a rape at Syracuse University. So, like, actually something that maybe a young woman might want to
It'd be important to, and also young men to understand, like,
100%.
The perpetrators.
I thought these guys were weeding out the groomers, and now they're trying to hide material that might protect you from groomers.
But this, just trigger warning, because it's obviously disturbing stuff, and it becomes even more disturbing when this guy tries to sort of like put one of his colleagues in the position of being raped. It's really twisted. But check this out.
I'm going to read from the transcript Senator Bosselman spoke about. Quote, today I'm going to talk to you. This is from a proponent of 441. Today I'm going to talk to you about a library book that I found in 16 different libraries across Nebraska. In 5 of these schools use this book as an accelerated reader, Senator Kavanaugh's, meaning they quiz the students for points after they read it. The book is called Lucky by Alice Sebold. Quote, I'm going to read you some passages directly from the book that's available to minors in our schools. I did. My focus became acute. I started harder than ever at him. This is talking about a young girl. He began to knead his fists against the opening of my vagina, inserting his fingers into it 3 or 4 at a time. Something tore. I began to bleed there. I was wet now, Senator Kavanaugh. I'm excited. I made him excited. He was intrigued and worked his whole fist into my vagina and pumped it. And it went into my brain. Stop staring at me, he said. I'm sorry, I said. You're strong. I tried. I liked it. He started humping me again, wildly. The base of my spine was crushed into the ground. Glass cut in my back and behind. He kneeled back, raised your legs, he said. Spread them. Give me a blowjob, he said. He was standing now. I was grounded on the ground trying to search about the filth of my clothes. He kicked me and I crawled into a ball. I want a blowjob, Senator Kavanaugh. He held his dick in his hand. I don't know how, I said. What do you mean you don't know how? I've never done it before, I said. I'm a virgin. Put it in your mouth. I kneeled before him, Senator Kavanaugh.
I mean, this guy is
freak,
twisted, and I'm not even sure, like, if he knows what he's reading. Like, this is an incredibly violent recounting of violence, and I have no doubt the guy has no problem with the violent aspect of this. This guy's not on the the Senate floor saying that we shouldn't have violent movies or something like this. Or books that recount, like, I don't know, war or something.
It's also just fascinating that, like, the party in this situation who is calling for, like, the lack of obscenity in schools in this regard when it comes to literary material is the one inserting his colleague's name into a graphic description of rape and then reading it on the Senate floor.
And let's also be clear here too. I mean, this is a threat. I don't know how else to read this. I mean, not necessarily a threat that he will do what is being described here, but it's meant to intimidate a woman who, Kavanaugh in particular, has been open and vocal about protecting LGBTQ people within Nebraska. She's been Herculean, honestly, in her efforts there, particularly trans youth. This is a way to intimidate and threaten her with the most violent description of her rape, and having to, and he's almost getting off on having her listen to it.
Yeah. He's like, are you listening? Yeah, exactly. That was.
Here is her response that happened shortly after this.
Colleagues, that was beyond the pale. That was harassing. That was about a book about sexual violence. I have done nothing but try to have a respectful debate with Senator Albright about her bill that impacts my children. That was so out of line and unnecessary and disgusting to say my name over and over again like that. That is so inappropriate. And if you all have questions for attorneys, you have a prosecutor sitting right there who voted for this bill. Why don't you ask her some of the questions? Or why don't you get up and talk about this bill, why you voted for it? Let's have a real conversation, but don't start reading rape scenes and saying my name over and over again, Senator Halloran. You don't know anything about anyone else's life. And I can tell you that women in this body have been subject to sexual violence. I didn't know you were capable of such cruelty. That was so unbecoming of you and unbecoming of this body. And I hope that some other people who are Republicans will stand up and defend me. That was so inappropriate. And it was unbecoming for Senator Albright's priority bill. She has maintained a level of integrity in this debate, as have many of us, and you have not, Senator Halloran. That was obscene. I yield my time to the chair.
I wonder if any of those other Republicans stood up. I would be surprised, frankly.
KETV Omaha. Nebraska State Senator Steve Halloran could face censure expulsion for explicit comments during the debate. He has apologized in a way. Let me get the actual wording for this. I regret how I presented what I was presenting by calling out senators' names during the reading of that transcript. It's a very ugly transcript, Halloran said. He also attempted to talk to protesters Tuesday before being insulted and felt things got out of hand. Anybody who was one of those protesters who made him feel that things were getting out of hand, God bless you, and we need a lot more of that.
Yeah, you know why that passage was included? That's a book by Alice Sebold, right? She wrote the book The Lovely Bones, which was depicted into a movie, and then this was from her memoir, which she was describing her own rape that she survived in college.
Yeah.
From CBS here, outside of the content of the book itself, there was further controversy after Anthony Broadwater, the man who was convicted and imprisoned for Sebold's rape for 16 years, was exonerated. Understood, right? Sebold has publicly apologized for having mistakenly identified the man as her attacker. Either way, though, it doesn't necessarily matter there. The point is just that it's about what a rape feels like, even if it has nothing to do with the attacker itself. It was what her experience was. And it's important not just for young girls to hear this. It's important for boys to hear it, because they will understand what sexual violence they would be in. And it's not just boys and girls, or it's not just girls who are victims of rape. It's all genders. I understand that. But it's important for anybody to know that sexual violence is violence, especially young kids who might not have that education at home.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that a follow-up is absolutely in order. Him saying it's a very ugly transcript. Why? What's ugly about it? Is it because it's sexually gratuitous the way you were reading out, like a big-time freak?
Right.
Or is it because it's sexual violence?
Exactly. Like, if there was anybody who needed to read that and read it better, it was him.
And I think almost to deflect a little bit, that's why he said Senator Kavanaugh's in the beginning, because Michaela Kavanaugh's brother, John, is also a Nebraska state senator. So it almost, I think, he probably wanted a little bit of cover for implementing a woman's name.
Yeah, he's saying he's injecting the senator's
Senator
names.
Kavanaugh's.
Of course, that's his cover for that.
It was a man too.
As if it would make it any better.
Yeah.
As if it would make it any better. That's catastrophe. So,
Yeah, he could have
never
said
say
Mother
it.
Teresa's name in the middle of that. He's still
Stochastic.
misunderstanding it in a completely grotesque and freakish way that should have him driven. Like he shouldn't show his face in society, let alone a Senate legislature.
Not. Victims are just looking for empathy and understanding. We aren't getting it. Disco Asylum. These people are effing monsters. That was abhorrent. Lionel, Senator Kavanaugh should file sexual harassment charges against that disgusting a-hole. Apparently he's getting, what do you call it? Censured, or at least there's an attempt. Pax, this is why we can't have women in office. They get so emotional when men in
Nobody
office
knows
act
what the rules are.
wildly inappropriately.
Can't you specifically point a rape scene at somebody that you don't like politically? What are the rules? We don't know yet.
Amy Lefty Officer, I don't know how she held back from calling that guy a PEOS. Fizzy drinks, cruelty is the world. Steve Austin, that reading was psychological rape.
Also, he has no idea what she's been through.
Nope. Or anybody else in that room.
Had she been, I mean, it's abhorrent no matter what, but can you, like, they're pretending they're protecting people when, like, they have no idea if she was raped, and then she has to relive that trauma on the state senate floor. I'm still in shock. Like, I'd seen that headline, but man, I'm still in shock about what I just heard there.
Yeah, that was nuts. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 541 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, this is Ray from Eastern Oregon. Can
Ray?
you hear me okay?
Yeah, Ray from Eastern Oregon. What's on your mind?
Well, I have been very disturbed by what's going on in Israel and Gaza. Basically, I'm a lifelong atheist. I haven't heard anybody talk about how an atheist should view this situation. As someone that doesn't believe there's a God, there can't be a chosen people or a chosen...
You got to just speak a little bit closer to the phone. I mean, I think an atheist should view this in the same way anybody else does, because God has nothing to do with this.
Yeah. It's a fallacy that it's a religious conflict. I'll say this, and your question is valid, but I think that even framing it within a religious context is actually serving the Zionist propaganda that's enabled this genocide, which is that it's just a clash between two peoples and it's as ancient as anything, when in fact we know that this began with the British colonization of the region and then eventually the formation of the State of Israel, partitioned by the United Nations in 1948. It's not viewing it as religious in nature feeds into what they're trying to do, which is both sides this, as opposed to the very clear history of domination from a power backed by the UK, the United States, Germany, other Western forces.
Well, my problem is with religion to begin with, because it seems to me, if you look back through history, that religion has always been a tool of the wealthy and powerful to oppress and
I mean, look, I tend to be, pretty skeptical of religion broadly speaking too. But the point is that even talking about this in religious terms is irrelevant, and it really is obscuring what the dynamic is here. This is about people who are denied basic human freedoms. And the religious differences here, I mean, you can talk about religion in the sense that, like, Hamas is a different movement and player than, let's say, Fatah, and because they came out of the Muslim Brotherhood. But these are just like sociological realities and different ideologies that are playing out. The fundamental problem here is not that Israelis are, believe in, don't believe in Muhammad as a prophet, and Muslims do. That's not the issue here. That is what has been, used as a justification in many points. But that's not what's really going on. That's the window dressing. But appreciate the call.
Isn't the whole idea of Israel based on the idea that God blessed Abraham and promised him this land and all that?
I mean, I think there are definitely some Jews who believe that, but that's not what created the founding of Israel in 1948.
A lot of the original founding fathers of Israel were atheist labor Zionists.
And the most, there's a bunch of very religious Jews who don't believe that the state of Israel should exist without the second coming of the Messiah. So, I think you can find different people who will cite different things, but that's not fundamental to the conflict.
And let me just add this too. There are other fascist myths that are not religious that produce the same effect. We're seeing a version of it in what Putin has said about how Ukraine is really just greater Russia, right? That's not necessarily religious in its construction, but it's a myth of how this is really our land and we will conquer it because of these kind of mystical reasons that are associated with an imagined past. That is fascism. And so, religion, though, to your point, that's an easy thing to exploit for that very purpose. So you'll see that frequently. I mean, Manifest Destiny as well, in terms of our colonization. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's the first order problem that we should be dealing with here.
Appreciate the call.
Okay.
The Desmond Tutu told us on the old Majority Report. He came in, actually. I think he was in studio. I can't remember now. But I do remember him specifically saying, because both Janine and I are fairly skeptical of religion. I mean, I practice Judaism, Reform Judaism, but I have a very healthy dose of skepticism towards, religions and the existence of God, frankly. But with all that said, he said, which I thought it's obviously not unique to religion, but religion's been around for a long time and it's definitely been used in various ways. But he said it's like a knife. You can use it to spread butter, or you could use it to stab people. And I don't know. Probably more often than not. I don't think it's unconscionable. There's a little more stabby. But, I mean, there's certainly been some things that have been positive from religion. I'm not quite convinced that those positive things wouldn't have happened outside of the existence of religion. And I'm not quite convinced that, a lot of that stabbing wouldn't have happened either. Although, it's hard to motivate people sometimes to inflict harm on other people. I think it's harder to motivate people to inflict harm than it is to motivate people to do good. And so when you create these constructs, I think they serve a purpose. And, there's been, I think race and racism is also deployed in a similar way.
Yeah, I think the most operative one is nationalism, basically throughout. And there's a great, speaking of making people kill somebody, Orwell has a great quote in one of his articles during the Blitz on London by the Nazis. As I sit here now, people will fly bombs and drop them onto civilian areas and then go home and sleep well at night. And what allows them to do that is they're doing it for their nation.
Right. Let's see. Oh, I think we are out of time on the phone call portion of our program, ladies and gentlemen.
Whoa.
Apologies for that. Let's see. A spoon will spread softened butter just fine. A knife does not spread cold butter well. Okay, you may be taking that a little bit too far.
Well, think of it as a steak knife, right? A steak knife is better for stabbing and it doesn't spread butter that well, but it can still get the job done. It will just be jagged and mess up the butter sometimes.
Right, if you melt the butter, then you don't even need to spread it. You just pour it.
Yeah, and with margarine, use a katana.
Oh. How do you melt butter? Not in the microwave. Better not. Doesn't come out right.
I barely use.
I don't know what I'm talking about. We should just wrap up this conversation.
Dizzle
Cooking with
McFizzle. Pay her, Sam. Emma's day, Wednesday, hump day money. Day left is best. I'm not sure I follow that. To Israel, the Palestinians are mortar for the foundation of their nation. They're to be killed, and Israel's ethno-state replaced them. Truly monstrous. Tomo Flink. Happy Friends Day Wednesday, folks. Elon Levy, the suspended Israeli government spokesman who enjoyed embarrassing himself on British TV, has a Cameo account.
Oh, he does. Don't you worry.
So if a psychopath in your life has an extra special day coming up, why not make their day extra special with a shout out from Elon Levy?
What's his rate?
Also, if Dave Rubin is still looking for the apartheid in Tel Aviv, he should know that apartheid is an Afrikaans word to describe a state of being separate.
Oh, he's temporarily unavailable on Cameo now.
That's too bad.
Might have been a bad look. Might have been
Kind of
bad-
low
might have been
rent.
bad
I don't
look.
know. You're a spokesperson for Israel. Like, you need to be on Cameo, taking what, $50 to say hi, Bob in Tennessee.
Oh my God, these reviews. He's got 10 reviews, made a donation to Zaka, and got a lovely message from Ilion Levy.
Oh my God.
What else could you wish for? Great initiative.
Jesus. Jazz from San Diego. Although I don't agree with the all or nothing approach that Republicans are pushing when it comes to wind turbines, we do have to consider that a lot of these green energy alternatives really do have negative impacts on the environment. Wind turbines really do kill birds. Farmers are giving up their farms to solar panels. Why do we not just put them over parking lots? We need to address the greenwashing that happens on the left too. I think it's probably, again, there is going to be no initiative about anything that ever is not with its own problems. But I would say the pressing problem at the moment, and we have finite resources.
We have plenty of farm space that we could put windmills on. Come on.
Oh,
and they're getting a big subsidy. If you put a windmill on your land, trust me, that's corn you don't have to grow.
Right. I mean, without a doubt. And the idea that in some way solar farms are eating up our farmland is also absurd. I have no doubt some birds die from windmills. I also have a far
mass extinction
greater,
caused by fossil
I
fuels.
have a far greater confidence in just how mass extinction is operating. Like it is, and let's be clear, when we talk about mass extinction of species, that still is like, only part of the problem. It's also like the extinction of swaths of humanity that are going to be involved in this too. It's a very odd, like pedantic thing to like, we had this fight at Social Security in 2005. And back in the day, Air America, like Franken, there was started a weekly phone call with what few sort of like liberal left outlets there were at that time to sort of counteract what Grover Norquist was doing with the Wednesday breakfast. It wasn't nearly as like, we didn't have lawmakers there. It was just like literally a couple of magazines, one or other, radio outlet maybe. And Frank had sort of organized it because, he had the name. And there was a couple of guys whose names you are probably familiar with, who at the time were talking about the Social Security. And at that time, Josh Marshall, Talking Points memo, was whipping to find out like what the vote count was in the House, and was telling his listeners and his readers, I should say, to contact their congresspeople and get them where they were on the Social Security thing. And Bush was trying to privatize Social Security. And a lot of us were strategizing how we push back on this. What's the messaging? And there was a couple of like, well, it is the case, and remember now, this is 2004, that in 2033, the trust fund will pay out only 80% of what the benefits are. And we're like, well, yeah, but it's also the case that in 2005 or 6, there's no money for anything in government because it hasn't been determined. The budget hasn't passed. Like, we can see this. Like, every year there is no money for everything the government does, including the military, until lawmakers decide we're going to raise taxes or not raise taxes. We're going to borrow money or not borrow money. We're going to fund these things. The idea that we should be worried about Social Security trust fund, not the mechanism, but the trust fund, the extra amount of money there, 30 years out, we should be cutting Social Security and putting the money into the stock market. If you were relying on your retirement benefits in 2008, 9, you'd be screwed. You'd be absolutely screwed if you had to sell your stock at that time because you had retired a year or two before. I mean, you'd have been screwed beyond measure.
Mm-hmm.
And these people are like, well, but there's this, it's like you can nibble around the edges on something, but if it fundamentally undercuts the imperative number one, then what you're doing is stupid at best.
Right.
Yeah. And the thing with, I think it is actually a concern that a thoroughly capitalist political system will respond to a concern in a bad way. And actually the thing to keep an eye on, I think, with regards to green energy is, like we keep on with the UAW, make sure new plants making EVs aren't getting around union labor, or there's not a sort of decentralization that is attacking sort of public utilities and things like that. Like that's actually the big concern, not.
And to be clear, there is no doubt that the reason why the capitalist class will slow the role of responding to these things is because it creates a sort of a shock doctrine type of scenario. We don't have time to mess around with unions. We don't have time. We need to exploit the workers as much as possible to fix this thing that we have been putting off for as long as we can. So that's why this stuff from the ground, the moment it is constructed, the moment the policy is set, this has to be baked in there, or you will never get it back. You will lose it in eternity, perpetually. All right, couple more items. We're out of here. Okalabragai. Last night in Santa Ana, California, our city council meeting, there was a debate as to whether the city would restrict protests held in residential areas. While the ordinance was defeated, it's concerning that cities are entertaining these anti-democratic ordinances in the wake of backlash to U.S. policy in Israel. This ordinance in particular was a response to the pro-ceasefire protests in front of Rep. Lou Carrera's home. Well, the good news is it failed, so that's good. Joan in Mass. Must be nice to be a liberal like Mark Joseph Stern, to be so engrossed and enraged by what's going on the border, U.S. border, to be completely oblivious to the violence in the borders of Gaza. Yeah, I mean, he's a legal writer, and I don't know, if we were to bring him on about other policies, it might be an issue, but fantastic moron. I've noticed a lot of atheists tend to view Israel-Palestine as something wrong with religion, and specifically Islam, and use that as a way to obfuscate the fact that Israel is an apartheid state because it's essentially another colonial project. Certainly, Sam Harris, that's been his entire sort of like raison d'etre. Oh, and then he writes, I think Sam Harris is the perfect representative for this. Any love for the fork using butter spreader constituency of listeners? I didn't realize MR was in a utensil apartheid state. Okay. Kyle from Montreal. Kevin O'Leary, nicknamed Mr. and Mrs., a former dragon on Dragon's Den, who was so greedy and repugnant that the other rich people on the panel were often disgusted with his attitude toward contestants. Tried to ride the Trump wave after 2016 in a failed attempt to become conservative party leader. Sam, I must know if Fred Schneider from the B-52s talks like he sings. I seem to remember he sounded just like he sounded.
Speaking of guys who talk funny, we got to do the Mike Lindell thing tomorrow.
Oh, without a doubt. Wyoming Ryan. Wait, tomorrow's Thursday. Damn it. Every morning from 7 to 10, our local rural AM radio spews misinformation about renewables. Every day, the same thing. Wind and solar won't work in the winter here, over and over and over. Solar won't work in the Wyoming weather. I hear it all the time, regurgitated by friends and families complaining about this. This also applies to EVs, as the host commonly says you can't charge your EV in the winter because batteries won't hold the charge. Meanwhile, one of the largest wind farm projects being built in the Medicine Bow area of Wyoming. The propaganda is strong and has teeth here. All right, 2 more.
I mean, literally in Texas, that blackout that happened a while ago was because their gas stuff froze.
Claire Daly Stand. I can't stop thinking about the Barry Crimmins documentary while listening to this. These people are sick. Barry Crimmins, a comedian from Boston back in the day, also worked on Air America. And
he passed relatively recently, or no?
Maybe 3 or 4 years,
yeah.
maybe 5 years ago now, actually. And Barry, at one point, became aware that he had been molested as a child.
Oh.
And then began to testify in front of Congress because AOL was basically not policing in any way child predators. He was quite a guy. Also drank quite a bit back in the days in Boston. I remember a night where he came over and I saw him drink a case and a half of beer right in front of me, sitting in my living room.
How much is a case?
24 bottles.
What?
Oh my God, it was insane. It was.
I was like, 6-pack.
No,
Okay.
No.
How do you even have the bladder capacity to absorb that amount of liquid?
Well, he went to the bathroom multiple times, but
Just feel like there's a more efficient way to get that drunk without the amount of liquid.
well,
and,
I think he was also drinking some whiskey too, if I remember.
oh my
correctly.
God.
Yeah.
Well, you got to fill up your stomach. You got to fill up your stomach.
All right. The final I am of the. I mean, he when he passed, he had quit drinking and he was living a quieter life. But that was, 30 years ago now. So, Pan Burger Partner. He had a great story, and he wrote a book that it was the title of his book of essays, where he was in the green room at CNN at one point. He didn't get too many of those hits, but for a while he did. And the producer came in and said, "Oh, Henry Kissinger is here. Do you want to say hi?" And he goes, "I don't shake hands with war criminals."
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah, good words to live by. Pan Burger. Final I am of the day. The disgusting pendants on Omaha Twitter are defending what happened by calling out people who refer to the Nebraska unicameral as the Senate when recounting the story. It can be really depressing here sometimes. Bradley, Matt, Emma, great job today. Emma will be here tomorrow. I will see you on Friday. Bye. Bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know